Hello everybody and welcome to this tutorial. In this YouTube tutorial I will show how to write a script in C++, a function in C++ that enables you to save the content of a dynamic matrix into a binary file. The dynamic matrix will be defined with the Eigen library, and it will be made of numbers with double precision, so numbers with decimals. It's good to save the content of this type of matrix to a binary file because you save all the bytes that make the matrix to the file. Instead, when you save the content of a matrix of numbers into a CSV file, at some point you need to round off the numbers, the elements of the matrix because they have double precision. Okay, so of course, every time that you know that you will read the binary file and the content of your matrix from another C++ program that you will write, then you should use and pass the content of the matrix using a binary file, because in this way you can keep as much information as possible. Instead, when you know that you will need to read the content of your matrix from another program, then you should save the content using a CSV file. Alright, so in order to handle dynamic matrices made of double, I want to use the Eigen library in C++. So just look up for Eigen library in Google and download the zip file with the latest stable release. Alright, then let's create the folder for our program. I will call it YouTube tutorial. Then extract the Eigen library in your directory. Alright. You can rename the directory of the library simply into Eigen. And then let's open Visual Studio, with which I want to create my script. So let's make a new Visual C++ console application. It will be placed in YouTube tutorial directory, and I want to name my project simply tutorial. That's fine. Let's follow the wizard. Just leave console application precompile header. Alright. Here we have my precompile header, but I want to include some more. So first of all, I want to include fstream. Then I want to include iostream. Then I want to include my Eigen library, the Eigen dense, Eigen LU. Alright, at this point Visual Studio doesn't recognize my Eigen library, so let's put here, for example, release x64, and now you need to let Visual Studio recognize the Eigen library. So just click on your project properties, C++, general, make sure this configuration here matches the one that you are using. Then go to the Eigen library directory, copy the path, and paste the path in additional include directories. Then hit OK. At this point, Visual Studio should recognize your directory, and here we go. Then I want to use Eigen matrix XD, which is the type of matrices that are dense and made of doubles. Then using namespace std, which is very common, and I will need std to input and output, to do input and output. Then now I can create a function that I will call function rw that will enable me to save my matrix and load my matrix from a binary file. So let's define my matrix, which will be called matrix input output EO. Then const string file name, the name of my file, of my binary file, then const bool is right, a boolean input that I will set to define whether I want to do input and to save my matrix to my file or load my matrix from my file. So let's start with the case that we are writing to my file. So at this point this will be true, and I will enter between these brackets. Let's define a variable of type offstream and call it output data. I will open my file name. Then if this command is successful, I can proceed so first I want to declare 3 variables. So the first one, I, will be an index, R will be the rows of my matrix, and C will be the columns of my matrix. Alright, at this point I can write to my binary file the size of my matrix. So here const char, because I will write blocks of bytes. So I need to take the content of R, which has a size of int. Alright, then immediately after the integer R in my binary file will be written another integer which will be C, and again it will be an integer. Alright, at this point I don't want to save the elements of my matrix IO element by element in my binary file, but I want first to copy all the content in an array, which will be defined in my heap memory in this way, and of course this will be a one-dimensional array of size r times c. Then of course I want to copy the content of my matrix in the array. So let's create a for loop from 0 to the length, to the total length of the array, and in this for loop I will copy into the array the content of matrix IO, which will be converted from a two-dimension matrix into a one-dimension array. So here the number of column of the row index will be the division of I on C, and then the column index will be the rest between I and C. So this is to write the elements of matrix IO in my one-dimensional array. Alright, after this I can simply copy, let's say copy, but it's a writing of my array directly in my binary file. So let's char again. At this point I will define here my array. So my array will be written in my binary file, but at this point it will be the size of double, because my matrix is made of numbers with double precision, double time r and time c, because r times c is the number of elements in my array and in my matrix. Okay, output. After this I can simply close my file and return 0. Okay, and this is the part of my script that enables me to write the content of my matrix in a binary file. Now I need to create the part of the function that enables me to read from a binary file. So I will define a variable of type ifstream named input data. I will open my file name, and if this command is successful, then I can proceed and read my matrix from the binary file. So let's define again here I, R, C. Input data. At this point I will read from the binary file the size of my matrix. So I will put in R number of bytes that the number of bytes that contain the row, the number of rows of my matrix. Then after that I can read from the binary file a number, the bytes that contain the number of columns. Alright. Now that I know the size of my matrix, I can resize the input matrix with the actual size of my matrix stored in my binary file. Then I will create a for loop of with I that goes from 0 to the number of elements in my matrix, and at every step I will read the binary file and I will put what I read in my matrix input output at in a position that is defined by I divided by C and the modulus of I and C. And of course the size of these blocks is a double. Alright, so here every time that I increase I locate the corresponding element of my matrix IO in my binary file and take the a number of bytes that is the size of double from the binary file and put those bytes in my matrix IO. Alright, do you have some problems here with no, I don't think so. Oh yeah, too close. Alright, be careful to close the brackets in the right order. Alright, after this I can simply close my file and return 0. Okay, return 0. This point I should never get here, but if I get at this point of my function an error occurred, so I will simply return -1. Now it's time to use my function. So first of all, to show an example, I will define a matrix, two matrices actually, M1 that is it will be a random matrix of size 2 by 3, 2 rows, 3 columns, and another matrix M2 that will be a matrix of doubles of a random matrix of size 1 row 2 columns. Okay, at this point I can simply call my function, and I will save the content of matrix M1 to a file that I will call myfile.bin, and I will put 1 here so that I will enter in write mode. Then I want to show the content of M1 to show to the user the matrix that I wrote in my file. And I will show, just to make sure that the content is different, also M2. Alright. Now I will read the matrix that is in the binary file, but I will put the content in M2. I will use 0 here in order to enter in a read mode. Alright. And here again I want to show again the content of my matrices. After this I will put a get char just to freeze the terminal and show the results. Okay, let's compile. And see. So now here we have, if you go to the directory of your program, you don't have any bin file yet here. Then you can run your program. Okay, you have first 2 different matrices, even with a different size. Then the content of the first is saved into the binary file, and then you read the content of the matrix M1 from the binary file and put the result in M2, and so it is correct to see in the second time that the content of M2 is the same as M1. Moreover, you can go to your project and see that a file called myfile.bin exists. Of course, if you open myfile.bin like it was a CSV file, you don't see any number because the content is in a binary format, so it's simply a sequence of bytes. Okay, it's interesting to see that just to make sure that we can even create a large matrix called LM of type. It will be a random matrix with size 10,000 times 10,000. And just to show that this function works also with large matrices, then let me show that we can save this matrix as well. So I will save LM matrix in a file called large file.bin, and of course in write mode. Alright. So, alright, save and run. Okay, this was simply the first part of my program. Then I will hit enter, and it takes some time to write the large matrix to my hard drive, but afterwards you can simply locate a file called large file in your hard drive, and as you can see, the size is more than 700 megabytes. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial, and once again, with this tutorial you learned how to save the content of a dynamic matrix of doubles into a binary file, which is convenient because enables you to save all the information about the matrix in a file. The issue is that, of course, you need to know the sequence of the bytes with which that you followed in order to save the content of the matrix into the binary file. As I said, if you know that you will need to read the content of the matrix from another program, maybe a commercial program that you didn't write, perhaps it's better to save the content of your matrix in a CSV, so comma separated value file, as I showed in another tutorial. Thank you for watching, and subscribe to my channel, and see you next time.